Imagine a river so vast and powerful, it has nurtured civilizations for thousands of years. This is the Nile River. Stretching over a staggering 4,135 miles, the Nile is the longest river on our planet. This majestic, life-giving artery snakes its way through 11 countries in northeastern Africa, each one drawing sustenance from its waters. From its humble beginnings in the highlands of Rwanda and Burundi, it traverses through Tanzania, Uganda, and South Sudan, before reaching the vast plains of Sudan and Egypt, and ultimately emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. The Nile is more than just a geographical marvel. It's a living, breathing testament to the rise and fall of civilizations. The ancient Egyptians, one of the most sophisticated civilizations of the bygone era, owed their existence to this mighty river. The Nile's annual flooding, a phenomenon as predictable as the rising sun, enriched the soil along its banks, creating a fertile green belt in the midst of the arid desert. This fertile land gave birth to agriculture, and agriculture in turn gave rise to civilization. The Egyptians harnessed the river's bounty to grow crops such as wheat, flax, and papyrus, which not only fed their people, but also fueled their economy. The river was also their highway, a conduit for trade and communication. The pharaohs built their grand cities and monuments along its banks, their lives and deaths intrinsically linked to the river. The Nile was their lifeblood, their provider, and their path to the afterlife. But the Nile's influence extends beyond the annals of ancient history. Even today, it continues to play a vital role in the region's agriculture. It is the primary source of water for Sudan and Egypt, supporting millions of people who depend on farming and fishing for their livelihood. From ancient times to the present day, the Nile River remains a lifeline for the people who live along its banks. The Nile indeed is not just a river, it's a cradle of civilization, a timeless testament to humanity's ability to adapt and thrive in the face of nature's whims and furies. The Nile River, a lifeline for ancient civilizations, provided more than just water. This majestic river, flowing through the harsh desert, was a beacon of life and prosperity. It was an oasis amidst the sand, a river that ran like a thread, stitching together life and culture in a landscape that was otherwise barren. The Nile's benevolence wasn't merely in the form of water. Its annual flood was a gift to the lands that it touched. This was not the destructive flood that one might imagine. Rather, it was a nurturing one, a flood that enriched the parched soil with precious silt. This silt, loaded with nutrients, was like gold dust for the ancient farmers. It transformed the land around the Nile into a green belt of fertility, a stark contrast to the surrounding desert. Here, civilization flourished, and agriculture thrived. Fields of wheat and barley emerged along the riverbanks, feeding the growing populations of the ancient cities. But the Nile's generosity didn't stop at providing fertile soil. It also served as a crucial transportation route. Imagine the bustling activity along the river. Wooden boats laden with goods, people traveling up and down the river, from the Mediterranean Sea to the heart of Africa. The Nile was a highway of trade, connecting different regions and cultures. Goods, ideas, and cultures flowed along the river as freely as the water itself. It was a melting pot of civilizations, facilitating cultural exchange and fostering understanding among diverse ethnic groups. The Nile was not just a river, it was a lifeline. It was a conduit of life in a desert, a catalyst for the rise of one of the world's greatest civilizations. Without the Nile, ancient Egypt as we know it might have never existed. It was the artery that pumped life into the body of a civilization, nurturing it, helping it grow, and connecting it with the rest of the world. Indeed, the Nile River was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, a highway to prosperity and a path to cultural exchange. Fast forward to the present day, the Nile River continues to play a critical role, but its future hangs in the balance. As we venture into the 21st century, the Nile remains a lifeline for the countries it graces with its presence. Journeying through 11 nations, the river serves as a vital source of water for both domestic and industrial use. For centuries, the Nile's waters have nourished the arid lands, making agriculture possible in regions that would otherwise have been inhospitable. Today, it continues to provide water for irrigation, quenching the thirst of millions of acres of farmland. Beyond agriculture, the Nile has also become a powerhouse, quite literally. The river's immense flow and steep gradients have been harnessed to generate hydroelectric power. The most notable example of this is the Aswan High Dam in Egypt, which alone provides a significant portion of the country's electricity. But while the Nile continues to give, it's also under immense strain. Rapid population growth along its banks puts increasing pressure on its resources. The demand for water is rising, but the supply remains finite. Pollution, too, is a mounting challenge. Industrial waste, agricultural runoff, and untreated sewage all find their way into the river, threatening its ecosystem and the quality of its water. And then there's the specter of climate change. Rising temperatures could lead to increased evaporation, reducing the river's flow. Meanwhile, changes in rainfall patterns pose a risk to the Nile's delicate balance. Too much rain could lead to destructive floods, while too little could exacerbate water shortages. These challenges are complex and intertwined, requiring cooperation and commitment from all the nations that share the Nile's waters. The river that once gave birth to some of the world's earliest civilizations is now calling for our help. The Nile, once the cradle of civilization, now faces an uncertain future. In the course of 7 minutes, we have journeyed down the Nile, from its ancient past to its uncertain future. We've traversed the annals of time to revisit the Nile's pivotal role as the cradle of civilization. It was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, fostering growth, prosperity, and the birth of remarkable cultures. We then sailed into the present, witnessing the Nile's continued vitality. Even today, it remains a lifeline for millions, supplying water and fertile soil for agriculture. But we also confronted the challenges the Nile faces, the strain of a burgeoning population, climate change, and the fight for its precious resources. Our journey ends, but the story of the Nile is far from over. It's a tale that continues to unfold, fraught with challenges but brimming with resilience. As we continue to grapple with these challenges, one thing remains certain: the Nile River, this ancient lifeline, will always hold a central place in the heart of Africa.